Hi, I'm Paul Watson with City Team International. I am the city director for Portland, and what that basically means is I have two responsibilities. One set which falls on the compassion side of what we do, and that means that I have a homeless shelter that sleeps 58 men every night, 365 days a year. I have a feeding program that feeds breakfast and dinner to the homeless and disadvantaged population in Portland. We fed about 88,000 meals last month. And then I have two floors where men who are struggling with alcohol and drug addictions actually come in and live for a 12 to 14 month period as they're getting over their addiction, learning how to live as someone who is prone to addiction and struggles with that lifestyle. So pretty busy. We service on average 200 people a day and got a lot of different things going. We're gearing up for the holiday season. We're going to be distributing food boxes and toys, and we do backpacks for disadvantaged and displaced children to take home so they have food on the weekend. There's just a lot of things that go into running the compassion side of what we do. The second piece of what we do, or what I do here locally, is we are catalyzing disciple-making movements, and you're about to hear probably more. And then I am also a co-author with my father of the book that's coming out this Christmas, or this December 16th, called Contagious Disciple Making, Leading Others on a Journey of Discovery, that talks about applying a lot of the principles you'll hear today in a North America urban context. And when I started with City Team, they asked me to look into social media. Believe it or not, that was a few short years ago, but that was also when churches were just beginning to try to wrestle with social media and figure out what the role it had in the church. And so they were talking about, can you do church online? Can you reach out and disciple lost people into a relationship with Christ via online tools like Twitter and Facebook and those kind of things? And there were a lot of conversations that revolved around, can it be done? And then there were a whole lot of conversations that revolved around the topic of, should it be done? Because just because you can do something may not necessarily mean you should do. And so I dove in with both feet. I didn't get involved in all the debates and all of that. I was more interested in seeing, can things actually work this way? And my focus specifically was, can we take the disciple-making movement principles and apply them in an online environment? And can we teach other people to do the same? It was a lot of fun. And the answer is yes, you can do it. But it is really not easy. And it's not easy for a lot of reasons. And in fact, it's not easy for a lot of the same reasons that you're going to find that it may not be easy to apply disciple-making movement principles wherever you live and work as well. Just because something is in an online sphere doesn't really mean that it's much different from the way that we live offline. In fact, I believe that our lives are becoming more and more integrated every day, and people are finding the ways that match them better for integration, which I think is really, really cool, that each person can decide how it fits in their life and to what degree. But we started doing it. We did a lot of cool ministry. Was I able to have great spiritual conversations with lost people? Absolutely. There were some very neat conversations we had online. I was able to connect very deeply with some people that to this day I've never met, but I've been involved in, seeing their kids grow up and graduate, and in sending them baby gifts when they had new babies, and praying for their kids when their kids were in the hospital, and raising money to support them and pay for their financial bills. And so all that happened online with people that I've never actually met, but I knew existed and was able to follow and see their lives because of social media, and meet them because of social media. So yes, it's absolutely possible to get in, meet lost people, to have meaningful conversations that result in spiritual conversations in an online environment, and to do real ministry, compassion-based ministry, and reaching out to people and helping them out. There were times when we helped people pay rent as a community, not just me and not just other believers, but as a community of people in this online sphere that came around somebody that was struggling because they didn't have a job. There were times we prayed for their family for healing, and there were a lot of different things, and it was fascinating to watch and to learn how people related. We did do some Bible studies online. There were some difficulties in that. Number one, I learned that it's not a good idea to run a forum-based Bible study if you are going to be traveling out of the country and don't have the time to attend to give it the attention it needs, because things are happening clip, 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 and in just one short flight over, you can lose your entire group because somebody said something that was immediately adopted into the group, and it caused the whole group to explode. I, at one point in time, had a online forum Discovery Bible Study going, and we were reading through the Old Testament to help people discover who God was. And in that process, I was taking a trip overseas, missed out on dealing with things in the group, and a Christian came in the group and told the whole group that we didn't really have to worry about reading the Old Testament of the Bible because that was Old Covenant. There was a New Covenant in Jesus Christ, and everything else we should really ignore. And so that ended up exploding the group for various reasons, and I wasn't able to get to it in time to salvage it. And so that was interesting. But we have done lots of Discovery Bible Studies over Skype in real time with people. We've been able to do training in real time with people on how to make disciples. And then I have some friends in the Middle Eastern country that have taken radio and combined it with online Facebook into private conversations, into a chat environment, and led people to Christ, and they've actually been baptized in their context when they wouldn't have had access to the gospel any other way. So can it happen? The answer is yes. Let me talk to you about some of the obstacles, though, to it happening. Number one, combining online community with disciple-making movement principles is trying to combine two counterintuitive ideas. Okay, a lot of people aren't used to the disciple-making movement principles and some of the things that it talks about and how to think about things differently that way. And at the same time, they're not used to thinking about community as being anything other than something that's geographically based. And as a result, marrying those two principles became very, very different, because even the ones that were able to accept online community stuff often struggled with the idea that of how to make disciples in that sphere. And that led into point number two. And what we found out is that a lot of people, what they really wanted to do is take their church that was offline and just recreate that in an online environment. And that was another problem, because the online environment didn't have a similar culture. Now, were there people who were interested that gravitated toward that? Were there lost people who've been saved through that? Absolutely. But by and large, the offline church culture didn't necessarily match the online experience of community. And so people would come to a website to sit through an experience, but we weren't seeing them necessarily going back and making disciples, both of their online communities and of their offline communities. And that was a major indicator for success for us. If we engage them in an online environment, could the gospel infect their online community and transform their online community, as well as go offline with all of the participants in that Discovery Bible Study and ultimately transform their offline community? And in the church environment, when you took that whole model and just placed it online, we saw a lot of the similar problems that churches face these days in terms of, by and large, are people actively making disciples? And that was a struggle. And I talked to some churches that were doing some online stuff like lifechurch.tv and others about changing the way we did it, and yet they weren't interested in making that kind of counterintuitive shift that disciple-making movement principles that you've learned in this training or will learn in this training have that require in order to see the kind of movement that we're talking about. So that was a big deal. The other thing is very few people have the ability to subdivide a problem into smaller chunks, or a situation or an issue into smaller chunks, so that they can handle it case by case by case. And in order to engage in an online sphere, you can't think of engaging the entire online sphere at one time. What you have to consider is breaking it down into the smaller communities. And so you can find a community, and I found communities of, it was very interesting, of people that knitted. And so they have small offline knitting circles, but then they would talk to each other online, and they would swap plans back and forth and talk to one another and talk about their kids and everything else. And it would be nationwide community of online knitters that were connected and had all these offline expressions as well. I found another community of teachers that were very passionate about grammar. And, obviously if you're that passionate about grammar, you probably need Jesus. And so, no, just kidding. But you know, they were passionate about grammar, so they get together and they talk about grammar and the proper use of grammar. And even though that's not something that would excite me, it excited them, and they became a community around it. I found people that were well, lots of different communities. People that were interested in Dungeons and Dragons. People that were interested. There was a whole forum of people and websites dedicated to people that were interested in the show Lost back when it was popular, and other things like that. And so, if you have the ability to subdivide the situation or the issue and be able to sit there and go, okay, how am I as a Christian going to be a believer in this space without being obnoxiously religious? How can I be conspicuously spiritual? How can I engage in the conversation without hijacking their threads in a way that reveal to people that I'm an okay guy, that I'm a safe place to have private chats with about your spiritual condition? I've prayed for atheists online. I've prayed for witches online. I've actually seen that people have been healed through prayers that we've prayed online, because it's kind of cool. The Holy Spirit is in both places at both times, and we don't have to wait on a physical presence in order for Him to be equally present with both people on the other side of a computer screen or a phone screen. So you have to have the ability to subdivide the issue. If you can't, you just look at, I've got to reach the whole online sphere, you're going to run into some serious issue. So, and I recommend that you start with your hobbies and your interests as you get online, and you look for communities of people that are talking about those things, and you begin to engage them meaningfully, become a contributing member of the community. And over time, as people check out your profiles and read your personal blogs or your Twitter feeds, they're going to know you're a believer. And you're going to get invited into spiritual conversations. In fact, probably most of you have been in those kind of conversations. They may have gone wrong because you may have tried to take offline techniques and applied them to an online environment, or old disciple-making principles that really are more in your face and confrontational than the discovery approaches that we talk about with disciple-making movements. But if you do the disciple-making movement stuff and help people through discovery, it can get really, really cool. The other thing that you have to realize here as well is the temptation is that I'm going to, when I think about going into online spheres, I'm going to go set up a Christian site and maybe deal with apologetics, and people are going to find my Christian site and then come to know Christ. And in reality, what ends up happening is that Christian sites attract other Christians. They attract trolls. And they also attract the very, very few people who will go to a Christian site to search for the answers to their spiritual questions. So I don't recommend setting up a Christian site. What I recommend is setting up a site and a subject that is passionate to that you're passionate about. So, for example, go set up a photography blog and post all of your photos that you take and talk about what inspired you to take a photo and what you like about this photo and that photo and what you've learned, and talk about your gear and those kind of things. And then go to some offline conferences and meet people that maybe you talked with in an online environment. Meet people that were in other photo blogs that you engaged in conversation. And through that process, you'll get to know a large number of lost people all over the United States and maybe even the world, that you can begin, you have a place, you've earned a spot to begin to engage them in conversation. And ultimately, those conversations, we all know, they go from casual conversations to meaningful conversations to spiritual conversations. And we always pray that God gives us the opportunity to invite people into a Bible study so that they can discover who He is for themselves. And they'll talk more about that in this training if they haven't already. The next mistake that I see people making, and this is the last thing I want to leave with you guys, is the same mistake that people doing disciple making or wanting to do disciple making make online or offline, and that is we don't mobilize enough prayer for it. Guys, a prayer movement precedes all modern disciple-making movements. In fact, I would say all historical movements throughout known history. Without the power of Jesus Christ, you're not going to have movements. Without His people being in line with the desires of Christ and listening to the Holy Spirit, we're not going to be able to find the persons of peace and able to start movements at all. And so I found a lot of ministries, they'd move online, and they were as lackadaisical about mobilizing prayer for their online ministry as they were for their offline ministry. Everyone gives it lip service, but very few people actually are willing to lean in and do the hard work of praying that's required to set the foundation to see hundreds of thousands of people come to know Christ. And I can tell you, you could set up all the blogs you want in the world, and you'll see some people come to know Jesus, but you will not see movement unless you are passionately dedicated to being a person of prayer of your own. So those are a few thoughts about social media. I use it all the time. If you want to, you can follow me on my blog, www.pauld for David or Dork, whichever one you can remember better, pauldwatson.com. And don't hesitate to shoot me an email or Twitter or Facebook if you have any questions at all or want to engage in any conversations. So thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, and God bless. Have fun.